Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be looking at the Green Lane project and learning more about the application process. My name is Kit Keller. I'm Executive Director of the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, and we're delighted to see so much interest in this topic and so many cities thinking about applying for the next round of Green Lanes. We're pleased to have a number of excellent presenters with us today, and we will be starting with that presentation shortly. Beforehand, though, I'd like to remind everyone that we're exploring the topic of safety in numbers for cyclists and pedestrians at our regular monthly webinar on November the 20th, and that we'll be starting a series of webinars on bicycle transit systems, and that begins on December 4th. So please mark your calendars for those and join us if you can. Both the individual monthly webinar and the series will be recorded and archived as well. So for today's webinar presentation, we're delighted to be joined by Salita Reynolds, and she is Livable Streets Section Leader with San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, also a former APVP board member and a longtime board member. She will be speaking with us today from San Francisco. Martha Ruskowski is the Green Lane Project Director for PeopleforBikes, and she is based in Boulder, Colorado. Zach Vanderkoy is Green Lane Project, also PeopleforBikes, and he too is in Boulder, Colorado. With that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Martha. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today. Let me get this slideshow figured out. Hold on one second. Slight technical challenge. Come on, baby. Okay. Whew. So delighted to be here today. The mission today is to give you an overview of the Green Lane Project Round 2. We are in search of 6 more cities that we will work with in 2014 and 2015. I am going to spend some time kind of explaining the program, explaining what we offer, explaining what we're looking for in 6 new cities. Then we'll turn it over to Salita Reynolds from San Francisco, who is a veteran of the first round of Green Lane Project, so she can speak briefly about what it was like to be one of our cities. And then we'll leave plenty of time for questions. Anything that we didn't make clear during the presentation, feel free to send us questions. I think Kit has a couple of quick poll questions that we'll also interject along the way. So without further ado, let me get going. Green Lane Project is a campaign to get better bike lanes on the ground in the United States. So our focus is on protected bike lanes because we believe they are game-changing. They make a huge difference in terms of reaching the interested but concerned, and they're the tool for big, busy streets. And it's something we've been missing in our United States toolbox, and we believe it's a big part of the reason why we're only at 1% bike mode share today. So we started in 2012 with a really focused mission to help cities get protected bike lanes on the ground. We work for PeopleforBikes, which is a national nonprofit. We are based in Boulder, Colorado. Up until a couple of months ago, we were known as Bikes Belong. Started in 1999 by the bike industry. So our major funding, our primary funding, comes from the big bike industry companies, Trek, Specialized, Interbike, Shimano, SRAM, Cycling Fund, really all of the leaders of the U.S. bike industry and what you might think of as enlightened self-interest to help get more people on bikes more often. So we have a new name for our big overall program. So Green Lane Project, launched in 2012, we did a competitive process to select 6 cities that we felt were going to make a lot of progress in getting protected bike lanes on the ground. It's been really fun and we believe really effective over the last 2 years. Our cities collectively have accounted for more than half of the new protected lanes that have gotten on the ground. We are learning a lot. This is a rapidly evolving art and practice in the United States. This is Washington, D.C., L Street Northwest. They're experimenting with mixing zones. JFK Drive in San Francisco was one of our first parking protected bike lanes where they flipped a traditional bike lane and on-street parking to provide more protection for the bicyclists. San Francisco is working on Oak and Fell Street, two short sections that are really important. These are busy streets that are a missing link in the main east-west corridor across the city. Austin has done a couple of really interesting projects. This was a really simple installation during their reconstruction project that provides access to an elementary school. They're doing some more elegant permanent installations in downtown Austin using precast concrete curbs. Memphis is working on a protected bike lane. This one is being actually crowdsourced in part for funding led by the business district along this corridor. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. One of the biggest projects was Chicago took away a lane on Dearborn Street through the heart of downtown to do a two-way protected lane that is controlled by bike-specific signals at every intersection. Portland has done some interesting work in conjunction with local developers who wanted to see a more vibrant streetscape, a really cheap installation using paint and planters. So that's the really quick view of some of the cool projects. We did an inventory of protected lanes across the country. As you can see by this chart, the first few were built in New York City in the 1880s. New York City really kicked it off again in 2008. Mayor Bloomberg and Jeanette Sadiq-Khan really rethinking streets as public spaces. NACTO's Urban Bikeway Design Guide made a huge difference. That came out in the beginning of 2011, and we launched the Green Lane Project at the beginning of 2012. So we're seeing pretty rapid growth and evolution of these projects. All right, why are cities building these? They're interested in reaching the interested but concerned, the people who are not comfortable riding on our systems as they're designed and built today. And as we know, that's a lot of people out there, a lot of potential trips, short trips we could shift from bikes, from cars to bikes. Cities are really being driven by economic development arguments. They all want to attract more high-tech companies into their downtowns. They want to be vibrant, resilient, sustainable. The mobility issues are significant as more people move into our downtowns. There's a big demographic shift underway. So cities are looking at bikes as a way to relieve some point congestion. And there's emerging research around ordering the streets, that drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists all benefit when the streets are more orderly and there's really clear places for everyone to ride. Now, let me launch into Green Lane Project 2. So, our mission is to get protected lanes embedded, institutionalized into the U.S. design toolbox really broadly. We worked with 6 cities for 2 years. We're at a place where we feel like a really smart strategic thing to do is to find 6 more cities to work with for 2014 and 2015. And these will be cities that are really ready to make progress, that are at a magical point in their evolution where they have political support, staff on board, community support, and projects in the pipeline. Here's some of our rules. The city has to apply. It's not an advocacy group, not a community group, it's the city themselves. We have also, though, broadened it out this time to realize that in some places, counties actually control most of the local street system or control a significant amount of the local street system, the arterial street system. Counties can apply. We're also willing to accept applications from, say, a council of governments or a consortium of cities in an area. The trick is we have to have one point of contact. We're not going to mediate between 3 different cities that all want to be part of it. They need to get together and say, this is who you're going to work with, and we'll work it out collectively. So we're thinking we will likely work with cities, but we are in conversations with a few like MPOs and counties who are also applying. So in terms of what cities get, this is not money in the pocket of cities. We do not pay for infrastructure. We would love to, it's just way beyond our means. It's more that cities become part of this exclusive club, a support group. We do monthly conference calls with the lead person from each city. In San Francisco, it was Salita Reynolds. We offer strategic and technical assistance based on what the cities tell us they need, in terms of, how can we help? So we've done some market research. We've done some work on making sure that protected lanes meet ADA requirements. We're doing some work in terms of mobilizing support from the business community, all in response to our 6 cities and what the leads told us they need. We do study tours. We take leaders from the cities on some domestic tours as well as international tours. And we found that that is probably the most transformative thing that we do for the cities, is when their elected officials, their heads of transportation, their city managers, others go to the Netherlands and really see what a vibrant bike system looks like. They come back all fired up and with this vision to accomplish more in their city. We do a lot of PR to help make your city look good, talk about your progress, position you as a leader. We have undertaken some research projects. Portland State University is doing a big project right now. The results will come out early next year, looking at safety, usage, and a lot of survey work around a corridor in each of the 6 cities. I'm not sure what our research agenda will be for the next 2 years, although we are in conversation with Portland State University about another round of federal funding. So I'm sure we'll do another great research project. We've also done some small grants in the order of $25,000 to the cities themselves, or also to advocacy groups in the cities to help build support. Oh, let's see, come on, sorry, technical bit. So what we need from the cities, you have to go through the application process. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We also expect that someone from the city join our monthly conference calls. It's our very exclusive call. It's a therapy session and a discussion of what are the different cities doing, what are your challenges, what's your progress. We rely on the cities to identify who is going to go on the study tours and get those people lined up. We will also request that the cities give us periodic updates on what's going on in your city, probably on a twice a year basis, so that we can track a number of metrics in your cities. In general, we cover all of the costs for Green Lane project activities, with the exception of airfare for the international study tours. So some cities have actually come up, put the airfare into their travel budgets. Others have also worked with community foundations and other outside funders in their city to cover the airfare. And we cover all the rest of the costs. So there's not really a budget line item that cities need to create to participate in the Green Lane project, except that we expect the cities to be putting good projects on the ground. The schedule, letter of interest due November 15th, that would be Friday. It's a very simple form on our website. It's basically just a contact, who you are, and are you building at least one good project in the next 2 years. The full application is due in mid-January, and then we will announce the cities in March. We will likely do a kickoff meeting where we'll bring together the leaders from each of our 6 new cities in May. And as we get those details more lined out, we will add those to the website. Also, if you have submitted a letter of intent, we will send you an email to let you know as other planning pieces evolve. We do know the dates for our international study tours for 2014, so you can find those in the website if you're trying to, if you're thinking of applying and want to fill in those details for whoever needs to know those. I seem to have lost my ability to forward here. So here's what we're looking for. Cities need to be building at least one good protected lane project over the next 2 years. Preferably, it's a transformative project. It's something that is going to link a trail to a major destination, something that's really going to get used and is really going to make a difference in your city. We are looking for strong political support that in some of our cities comes directly from the mayor. In other places, it's a little more diffused. It might be several city council members who are supportive in general of the city moving forward on bike projects. In a few cases, it has been more driven by one really effective, really smart city council member. We're looking for staff on board. We need to know that your chief engineer is willing to build these projects and that they're not standing in the way of getting these projects on the ground. Because this is really about finding cities that can make a lot of progress. It is not about bringing along the laggards, the really recalcitrant cities in terms of our 6 cities. We also want evidence of community support. So we ask for a letter from a community group that is most likely your local bike advocacy group, but it can be another community group that's really interested in advancing these projects. New for this time, we're asking for a letter of support from some business interest. We want to make sure that there's at least some support from your business community for bike projects in your city. It could be a chamber of commerce, it could be a business improvement district, it could even be, just the leader of a local business who's willing to write a letter of support and say, yep, I'm in. We have an optional request for a letter from a foundation or other local funder. We're interested in understanding if in your philanthropic world, are there foundations that are interested in supporting cities in these efforts or supporting nonprofits in getting these projects on the ground? It does not have to be a commitment of funding, and we're not looking for money for our project. We're interested in, is your philanthropic community interested in supporting projects in your city? As I said, that's optional, but we've been talking to a lot of people on the foundation side, and we're finding that a lot of them are very interested in this and want to be asked to submit a letter. And it can be just a letter of interest saying, oh yeah, this sort of fits with our grant making priorities for the next couple of years. We understand foundations move very slowly, so actually getting them to the point where they've approved a grant in our application cycle is probably not realistic. We are looking for geographic diversity. We want cities from across the country. We are also looking for what we call champions and climbers and starter cities. So there's some really interesting work done in Europe. The Presto project went around and talked to a whole lot of European cities. Sorry. This is straight from the Presto report, so I apologize for the quality of this. But they looked at a lot of European cities in terms of their mode share, their bike mode share, and their cycling conditions, and they categorized them into 3 different categories, with champions being a lot of cities in the Netherlands, Utrecht, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, cities with a really high mode share and great cycling conditions. They also looked at starter cities and climber cities. So these were cities that did not have as high a mode share, they didn't have as good a cycling conditions, and they looked at sort of what was the mix of what they needed to do to make progress. So if you translate to the US context, our champion cities are much lower down on the scale. They're not nearly as good as European cities, but we do have champion cities, ones that are really leading, like Portland and San Francisco. So we want some champion cities in our portfolio over the next 2 years. We also want at least a couple of starter cities. So in our first series, that was Memphis, who had about a 0.1% bike mode share and was named by Bicycling Magazine as the worst city in the country for bicycling in 2008 and 2010. but they got a new mayor, they got a new head of transportation, they had a lot of community support. So we felt like they had the potential to get a lot done over the 2-year period. So in this go around, we're looking for some cities at all 3 places in that spectrum, with the common theme being ability to make a lot of change over the next 2 years, make progress. So who should apply? Any city with a protected bike lane in the pipeline should apply. The application process is not particularly onerous. I'm guessing it would take someone 3 or 4 hours to collect the information that we ask for at most. Although it also is designed to catalyze some conversations between the elected officials, top city transportation leadership, bike ped coordinators, the people who are actually down there doing the work of what projects can get done, and also catalyze the conversations between the city folks and your community groups and your business community. Why should you apply? 1, because we will select 6 cities. 2, we found the application process itself can be really catalytic because it convenes a conversation around this. It gives the bike ped coordinator who's been really thinking about this an opportunity to show that map or that list of what's in the bike plan or what could be done to the higher leadership in a way that they might not have been asked to share that before. And the final reason is that we are working on developing what we call a green lane network, which will be a lower level of support and benefits to every city that is working on a protected bike lane project, so that we can better get information to them and help them resolve their problems. So we're still putting together, any city that applies will automatically be invited to join that network. I'm going to stop there. I think we have some questions, but let me turn this over to Salita so she can share a little bit about what it's like from a city perspective and any insight she has.
Thank you so much, Martha. And before we go to Salita, we are going to launch one of the polls that we have. We want to get a sense of the interest in the Green Lane project by our viewers today. So if you can take a moment and answer which of these applies to you, that would be really helpful. We'll keep that poll open until we have the majority of responses. Steve is our webinar producer today. Steve, how are we doing on that poll?
We're climbing north of 70% of our audience has voted. We'll give her a couple more seconds and then I'll share the results with everyone.
Great, thank you. Excellent. And just a reminder, if you do have a question about what Martha has covered so far, you can type it into the question panel and we'll get to as many as possible. All right, thanks. And here is the poll results. So looks like we have about 1/3 of the folks looking to make an application or working on it. So that's great. And we'll have some good news for those in the other categories shortly. Welcome, Salita.
Thanks. I will give a little perspective on what it was like to be in one of the Green Lane cities over the last couple of years, and also hope that those of you who are on the fence will really seriously consider giving it a go. I think that the act of applying can be useful in and of itself, even if you're not selected, in terms of both catalyzing sort of interest around these issues and also giving your local agency a chance to reflect on what you've done and what you want to do. You know, sometimes it's just a good excuse to sort of check in and benchmark your progress. So to start off with, I describe being in the Green Lane Project as a mix of grad school, therapy, and summer camp. It really is amazing. It was an incredible experience, has been an incredible experience. We still have a few months left to go. Just in terms of the network of people that you get to know over the course of the project and really become resources and sounding boards for you as you consider not just building protected bikeways, but doing all kinds of innovative things, establishing that network of your peers and your betters is pretty invaluable. And even though there are a lot of amazing resources out there for people in the profession, including the APBP listserv and the NACTO Cities for Cycling email group, this is a step even beyond that, because you form the relationships and then you can pick up the phone really easily and talk to some of the people who are out there building and doing and struggling with the same things that you are. I think that some of the benefits I would ascribe to being involved are, there's probably 4 or 5 of them, or maybe there's 3 or 4 major ones, and then just a word of advice. One of them is that you really do get to help drive the national conversation around planning and design. So, you know, the NACTO Urban Bikeway Design Guide and the Cities for Cycling is a great place where a lot of the discussion is happening. But then we were able to get really deep into issues that go beyond what's in the Urban Street Design Guide and the Urban Bikeway Design Guide, to things that are really specific to kind of what we were dealing with as cities. Some examples of that are really talking about kicking off the conversation and really getting it going around incorporating practices of universal design and accessibility into our protected bikeway designs, and developing some sort of national guidelines or drawings and sort of thinking around that, driving the conversation around equity, and sort of convening a group in Austin, Texas to talk about that with representatives from every city, and economics, really helping to share information and further the conversation around the economic benefits of improving livability in cities with protected bikeways. Some specific ways that we use some of the funding Martha talked about, we actually did use it on a couple of intersection improvements. So she's right in saying we can't build major infrastructure with 25 grand, but it actually goes a lot farther than you think. And we were able to address 2 of our sort of worst intersections for bicycle safety with some innovative designs using this funding, because the funding is not tied to you know, any particular set of design standards, and allows us a lot of flexibility in trying out new things. We were able to use it to, we are going to be beneficiaries of some of the research that's being done out of Portland State, and are already putting that initial findings from that research into practice and kind of getting and sharing information with people about the success of some of our projects. And then we were also able to use it to do something really interesting, which is to conduct a series of focus groups in San Francisco, and we actually partnered with Portland on this to find out a little bit more about, first of all, why people in our cities, what their concerns are and why they're not bicycling more, but also to help better understand how we can communicate these investments to an audience of people who maybe are not currently bicycling, in a way that resonates with them and helps them understand how it all kind of comes together. And we found out some really amazing, unexpected things from that work, and are also able to put it into practice in how we're doing outreach around our projects. Another benefit was really seeding new leaders and creating champions while reinvigorating people who may have been at this for a really long time. And that really happened because we were able to send folks on the study tours to the Netherlands and to Denmark, and those folks are people who were maybe on the fence, so they didn't oppose what we were doing, but they also weren't sort of fully invested in it or really had made the connections to understand why we thought it was so important. And to a person, all of those folks that we sent have come back, and we've seen real change. And everybody from sort of our transit service planners to folks from the mayor's budget and controller's office, you know, and some of our actual policymakers, we've really gotten tremendous benefit from that. We did send one staff person on each of those trips, and that was pretty invaluable for those folks as well, the people who are really in the trenches, working hard, doing the work, being able to talk to a new audience of people and also be in those environments was just really valuable. And then keeping our leaders accountable and on a benchmark is another sort of valuable takeaway from it. So, you know, we started out with our application saying what we wanted to do over the next couple of years, and then you know, we're checking in along the way to sort of chart our progress and share it with the other Green Lane cities, and then share it with our leaders and highlight potential roadblocks that we were encountering to get to where we wanted to and where we said we would and where we all agreed we would over the life of the project. And so it was just a nice tool and an excuse to check in on these things and also spark a conversation with folks who can help get some of those roadblocks out of the way. And I would just say that if that you get out of it what you put into it, it's just like anything else. And making sure that you have a commitment, you have somebody at the staff level who is gonna, you have support from sort of higher ups to spend time on this, and to have maybe you know, one person who is the key point of contact, and then perhaps a support person as well, so that you really get the most benefit out of being involved.
Great. Thank you, Salita. And Salita has been speaking to us from San Francisco. She works for the San Francisco MTA. So we have a few questions and we'd like to get to them. But before we do, we have a second poll that we'd like to launch. And Steve, if you'll go ahead and launch that poll, which you've done, great. And then I'll pick up the controls and show images of those on our panel, and then we'll be getting to questions shortly. We're very interested to know what the challenges might be that would prevent you from building, or your city from building, protected bike lanes. So how are we doing on that poll, Steve?
We're just a little bit north of 50% right now, Kit. Let me give her about 10 more seconds and then I'll share the results with everyone.
Great. This is something that APBP's board is very interested in knowing, so do take a moment to respond to this poll. It will really help us in terms of programming and allocation of resources. Great.
And Kit, this is Martha again. I would say it's been really fun and valuable, I think, working with APBP, working with NACDO, you know, working with the sort of the wide variety of partners who are all interested in these innovative bike facilities. So it's been, I think, as a community, we're making a lot of progress in advancing these designs, you know, with the cities really being the lead in figuring them out, how to get them on the ground, and the rest of us, you know, coming together to figure out how do we propagate that knowledge, how does this state of the practice evolve more quickly.
Great. And we're pleased to be able to host this webinar today so that APBP members can learn more about the Green Lane project and move forward in their own planning process. We have a handful of questions and we'll get to as many as we can in our last 20 minutes or so. So the first one is having to do with the size of the cities. Do you have any parameters around size of the cities? Are larger cities more advantaged? Would you encourage smaller cities to apply?
We have set the limit at 80,000 people as at the bottom end, because we felt like below that there's just not really the capacity to make significant change within the cities quickly. So beyond that, anywhere from 80,000 on up, folks are welcome to apply. We don't really have a firm number in mind of, you know, do we want small cities, do we want large cities? I'm hoping that we'll have a spread. In the first round, 5 of our 6 cities were between 600 and 800,000 people, with Chicago being the only much larger city at 2.2 million. So we're pretty open. The goal here, one of the goals is to have a portfolio of cities that can be inspirational across the country. And it's interesting because I think actually in terms of inspiration, Memphis was probably the best in terms of other cities looking to Memphis and saying, well, if Memphis could do it, we can too. Because places like Portland and Boulder tend to get dismissed of like, oh, well, they're special, they're different. But when you put Memphis in the mix, all of a sudden that narrative evolves a little bit more. So we're definitely looking for a few more Memphises this time around.
That's a great observation, Martha. Thank you. Although it always is important to remember that if you look at the development of bicycle facilities in Portland, Oregon, they certainly started at a very different place than where they are today. So everyone starts somewhere, and part of this project is to help advance that effort more quickly. So a number of questions are coming in. Would you speak to the question of whether a council of governments might apply for this program?
Yes, we have told a few council of governments that they can apply. I think the concern from our end is that we need the direct connection to projects actually being on the ground. And so that's why we've skewed towards city transportation departments, because they are doing the planning, design, implementation. I think a council of governments as sort of a coordinating body can apply, but they're going to need to show us direct line of how they, as our participant, are intimately involved in actually getting projects on the ground. So it may be the Council of Governments is applying on behalf of a consortium of 2 or 3 cities, and that's okay. We are clear that we don't want to get tangled up in local politics, and so there's been some real clarity in just working with a city, but we're open. We're all about, who's going to make the most progress.
Well, that's great. And we do have a couple of specific questions on projects and whether particular projects would meet the criteria. So let's get to those next. One person in the audience says, we have a bike lane project slated within the next 2 years and want to convert it to a green lane project. Does this project meet the requirement of being in the pipeline?
It does. It seems like a lot of cities, some of the easier projects to implement are ones where they're taking a bike lane, a conventional bike lane, and adding those additional elements of protection to it. So those definitely qualify. We do want to see protected bike lane projects. Adding a painted buffer is fine. It's better than just a conventional lane. Adding green paint is fine, but our focus is really on kind of the best of that continuum, which is when you add some kind of physical protection to the mix. That said, we realize that protected bike lanes are only one piece of it. So we're also interested in how is your network evolving, because that's really where cities need to get to, is creating an interconnected low stress network, which is bicycle boulevards, neighborhood greenways, completely separated pathways, conventional bike lanes, protected bike lanes. So we are really interested in, are you thinking about a complete network, but our laser focus is, are you building protected bike lanes?
So looking to the question of the network as well, another question about projects, is an initial landmark project enough, or do the chosen cities need to have multiple projects?
We selected Memphis based on one project. And their one project at the time had been, the design of it was solely funded by community dollars. The city had not yet put any money into it. So we were a little astounded to find that nonprofits were actually raising the money to do design work for a protected lane. So for cities that are in that kind of starter category, one good project is enough. For cities that are more advanced, that would be more sort of in our climber and champion cities, they will need to do more. San Francisco has put a number of projects on the ground, and they aren't easy projects. But that was sort of an expectation of a place like San Francisco that has been working on this for a while and has a lot of political support, and it's pretty ingrained.
Excellent.
So yes.
Let's go to funding next. We have a couple of questions on funding projects or funding through the grant program that you may offer. Here is a question of what funding mechanisms have communities used generally for green lane projects?
So we did a survey of cities. I think we had 85 cities respond. You could find it on your on our website, or Kit, I can forward the link, which then we can forward around. But we asked cities how they were funding these projects, and it was interesting because we asked what their primary source of funding was, and about half said local dollars. About a third said federal money was their primary source of funding. And then that final sixth said state money or other dollars. But then we asked folks for what kind of funding are you using for these projects? List all of the sources of funding. And it was very broad. It ranged from local dollars, development exactions. It was universities are paying to build these. It was the whole array of federal money, TAP, CMAQ, Safe Routes to School dollars. A few people had been using rivers and trails funding. So it was surprising and impressive to see the broad array of money that people have managed to access to get these on the ground.
And staying on the funding question for just a bit more, there does seem to be some confusion about whether a DOT funded, either at the federal level or state level, whether a DOT funded project would be eligible for a green lane project.
Yes. DOT funded projects are fine as long as they're building protected lanes. And we are seeing state DOTs moving forward and sort of wrestling with these concepts, the design issues. We're seeing that, some of the barriers of, can you use federal money for these projects? Can you build these projects on state highways? Those barriers are coming down slowly. If it's a project that is being managed by the state DOT, and it's on a state highway, and it's solely within the state DOT's purview to build that project, I would say the city should go ahead and apply, but we would want a strong letter of support from the state DOT, explaining that yes, they're fully committed to do this, and we'd want to be able to talk to them about that project. And we would want the city to be able to articulate how they're supporting this and how they're linking the network to that new facility.
All right, and specifically, have there been any barriers, any funding barriers for green lane projects using federal funds?
Yes. I think, like I said, I think it is getting better. The FHWA issued a memo in August that talked about flexibility in design. They have put out a few documents that have talked about how protected lane projects do meet the criteria for federal funding. But then you get down to a regional level and you have FHWA regional offices in the mix, and you get to the level of a state DOT, and you get to the level of at the MPO. And we have seen barriers and hesitation at all of those levels. But I do think there is a growing experience with these and a growing history of building these with federal money, so that it's not as much of a roadblock as it was previously. That you can absolutely build these with federal money, and if your state DOT is saying that you can't, then it's either that they are misinterpreting the federal guidance, or there is policy that has been enacted at the state DOT level that might be an additional barrier.
Thank you, Martha. And I did just forward the link that Zach sent to me for information about that funding report. So that's now should be visible to everyone. Let's talk a bit about the $25,000 grant that you talked about earlier. Does each chosen city automatically get the opportunity to apply for one of those grants, or would they ever be lucky enough to be able to apply for more than one?
We are still finalizing some budget numbers for next year. In the past, we've had some outside funding for Green Lane project, so we are waiting to learn about some of those pieces. It would be our hope that we would be able to offer another round of grants to our 6 cities. This grant round is limited to the 6 cities, and so they apply, they tell us what they would use the funding for. So I am reasonably confident that we will do that again, but it is dependent on us, on a couple of outside contributions being finalized before we will do that.
All right, great, thank you. And Zach has kindly entered a written response to the question about whether the city needed to provide funding for staff travel. So be sure to check on that if that's a question that you're looking for. It will appear, the answer appears in the question box. So Martha, is there a letter template for the letters of support that you offer as an aid to the application process?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think we've done that. Have we, Zach?
No, there's no template.
But I think we could, if it would be helpful, we could say take a few letters of support from the previous round that we especially liked and put them up on the website for people. We are looking, we feel like it is an opportunity for folks to help make their case. In the first go round, we had some very basic letters of support from a mayor of, I so-and-so do hereby, say that I support this application. That was okay. What we really liked are ones where people were actually thoughtful and they helped to make their case of why, from a mayoral perspective, they thought this was important. That gave us insight into this person actually got it, or, the people who are writing the letter for the mayor really got it. So there's not really a right way to do it, except that more, some detail and some thoughtfulness is appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
just to add to that, I mean, I think the strongest letters of support will show how the writer and their specific role can contribute to this project, to contribute to getting protected lanes on the ground. So if it's an elected official, it might be a commitment of funding. If it's a local advocacy group, it might be a brief outline of how they're going to help with outreach or communications. So those kinds of specifics will make the letters stronger.
Okay, so that is a letter of support once you're into the actual application process. Is there any guidance on a letter of interest, or how detailed do you want that to be?
I'll answer that. The letter of interest is a very simple web form. It's non-committal. It's basically just contact information and then one very brief question about your plans for building protected lanes in the next 2 years. We're asking cities to submit that by Friday, so 2 days from now. It'll take about 30 seconds to do. So if you're interested in doing a full application, even if you're not sure, I recommend doing that by Friday.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then we're going to move to a couple of other questions in our remaining minutes and then make an exciting announcement as well. Relating back to the poll where we were looking at some of the barriers, one of our listeners said, if only I could pick more than one. So I thought that was quite funny. And then the next question I'd like you to answer is, can you describe your experience or generally the experience of cities in the project now with outreach and collaborating with advocacy partners? And this question is coming, I believe, from a person in government. Yes, it is.
So I will speak briefly, and then Salida might want to embellish a little bit. Our primary relationship is with the city, and our relationship with the city is supportive. We do not take the cities to task. We do not criticize them. For one, because there's plenty of people in their own community who do that. That, you know, our role is to say, look, we believe you are going to do good things. We are going to help you get them on the ground. We also have a secondary relationship with the local advocacy groups, which really evolved over time in the first project, which was the cities told us that one of their biggest challenges was having broad public support, because a lot of these projects are difficult, especially if you're taking away travel lanes, if you're taking away parking, even if you're just changing how a street works. There's always people concerned about it, and they needed broad public support, people coming out to public meetings, people cheering when the projects were done to help balance out the concerns about the project. So in the second year, we actually provided some funding to the local advocacy groups, specifically to help them build broad public support for the projects that the cities were trying to build. And that gets a little bit more complicated because every advocacy group has a unique relationship with the city. I will say that in the cities where there is a lot of progress, we generally saw that the advocacy group and the city had a fairly complicated but generally supportive relationship where they're all kind of trying to head in the same direction. I don't know, Salida, are you there? Do you want to chime in at all?
Yeah, I would just say that I would echo what Martha said, in that we did feel like the Green Lane project was really about our relationship with the other cities and with the Green Lane project staff, and we actually found it really beneficial in our relationship with our local advocates, and we really did partner with them at the right time and the right moment. I mean, we worked together with them to sort of figure out who might be on their short list of folks to send on a study tour. We worked with them when people came back from the study tours to kind of convene discussions and brown bags around what people had learned, and also to sort of get an opportunity to keep us all accountable to what we felt when we got, when we stepped back off the plane into our own cities. And then the other sort of thing that was great is that when Martha or Zach would come to town to visit us, we also would get together. We get together with our advocates pretty frequently, about once every other week, in addition to meetings about specific projects. But we'd go on rides together. We'd co-host events when Martha would come and speak. And generally, it was just a very positive experience and something that our advocates were really excited about our participation in. So they generally wanted to be supportive and wanted to see it be successful. So I think it was the right way to start out, right note to start out on, and it stayed that way throughout our participation.
Great. Thank you, Salita. We have just a couple of more minutes for questions, and Zach has been responding to a few of the more specific questions that have been asked. So going back to the study trips for just a moment, would the selected cities participate in one or two of the study trips? There was some confusion about that.
Zach, do you want to chime in there? Oh, study trip
Sure.
master.
Yeah, so each city will have an opportunity to go on 2 international trips. I think that's what the question is about, if I'm reading the right one. So each city will have an opportunity to send 4 people to both Denmark and the Netherlands. The trip to one of those 2 countries will happen in the first year in 2014, and the trip to the other country will happen the next year in 2015. So once per year is the answer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I will say on our domestic trips, we did a technical tour in New York City, and every city sent 2 people to, we brought 2 people from each city on that tour. Some of the cities did step up and send a couple more staffers on that tour because they wanted to give them the experience of learning about the technical side. So generally our domestic tours, we bring representatives from all 6 cities. On the international ones, we take 3 cities to the Netherlands one year and then take those same 3 cities to Denmark the next year.
Yeah, I'd say on average, there's probably 3 Green Lane Project face-to-face gatherings per year. But with our first round of cities, it was almost always different people going on each of those. So it's unlikely that any one person would travel more than once per year as part of this project. However, there'll be a lot of conferences or other events where a lot of people will be in the same place at the same time anyway, and we may take advantage of that by organizing other get-togethers.
Great, thank you. And in our remaining moment, I want to announce that APBP and Bikes Belong, People for Bikes now, are talking about a series of webinars in 2014 to assist cities interested in implementing green lanes, even if they were not chosen as a green lane project. So we'll have more news on that to come, but we're very excited about that opportunity to really share some of the learning that's happened so far in the 6 cities and will be happening with an additional 6 cities. So Zach, is there anything I missed that you'd like to add about that?
Just that we're really looking forward to it. We really appreciate the quality of the webinars that APBP does, and just the ability to disseminate rapidly evolving knowledge through the ranks of the profession. So we're looking forward to doing that with you next year.
Excellent. Well, that's why we're here at APBP, and we're glad that you were here with us today on the webinar. Thank you to Martha Ruskowski for a great presentation, to Salita Reynolds for adding a local city perspective, and to Zach for answering so many of the technical questions as well. We're glad that you all attended in the audience. We wish you luck if you are moving forward with an application. Get that letter of interest in quickly, and stay tuned for more information about green lanes. Thanks so much, and have a great afternoon.